If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome team dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we are here to help. I'm John Kahns. Today, I am not joined by my co-host, Tai Hua, but we're still providing leadership development for Catholic ministry professionals. Every week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're having a conversation with a man that has a lot of experience in ministry. He's all over your social media. John Blevins, welcome to the podcast.
My friend, John, thanks for having me.
It is so good to see you. As I was kind of reaching out to you, I just had this memory. Do you remember way back when we were both working in the Chicago area in ministry, and we were having a conversation and you threw out this name, very popular video gamer. And I had no idea what was going on because I wasn't in video games at all. But you basically introduced me to the world of streaming for money. The fact that people could get paid to play video games, that was a real career that people could have. And it was the moment where that glass shattered for me, where I realized my parents were wrong and actually probably hampered my professional development when they told me to stop playing video games. Is that true?
It is true. Let's just say that your parents could have retired a lot earlier had they not told you to stop playing video games.
Unbelievable. And I'm going to need to get that in writing because they won't believe me. But this is great. It's good to see we got a little bit of history there from our time back in Chicago. And I would love for you to just share with the listeners. Let me get out of the way. Just share with them a little bit. I know who you are. I hear a little bit about what you're up to, but tell them, who's John Blevins? What does he do?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So Jonathan Blevins, I was born in Detroit, which is a huge part of the story because I'm a diehard Lions fan, Michigan, Red Wings, all the things. And it makes up about 80% of my personality. So I do have to share that. Lions had a heck of a season. Heart is broken still, but next year they'll be back. Born and raised Catholic. I've got two brothers and a sister. My parents were awesome, raising me in the faith. Decided when I was 18 or 19 to study theology, felt a call to, not really sure what, but to probably like serve in the church in some way. So I kind of packed up my life from Chicago and moved to Wisconsin, got my bachelor's degree in theology. I got my first middle school youth ministry job in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And then I became the high school youth minister and the director of youth ministry there while I met my wife. Been married for 10 years. We have 3 kids. While I was working in Manitowoc, I got my master's degree in religious education with an emphasis in youth and young adult ministry, and moved to Illinois, kind of back home. So born in Detroit, grew up in Illinois, went to Wisconsin for a while, back to Illinois. And I've been here ever since. So I've been here for 8 years. I worked at 2 different parishes as a director of evangelization at each parish. Both those parishes were awesome. Did a lot of great ministry there. A lot of hearts changed. God is good. And then about 5 years ago, I started streaming part-time in the evenings. For those who are unfamiliar with what that is, it's like YouTube, but live all the time on a website called Twitch. I just turned it on at night, played some Fortnite with a camera, and it's crazy. It kind of took off. It became my name is Bearded Blevins on all social media platforms. I live out my Catholic faith in everything that I do. So people ask a lot of questions about the faith, especially when I first started streaming 5 years ago. We talked a lot about it, and it was really cool. I got to see God kind of work in this new space that often is labeled as toxic or super negative. And then about 2 years ago, it was going so well, and I decided to make a business out of it and start streaming and doing content creation full time, with the purpose of bringing light into the darkness that can be the internet. And so that's what I've been doing full time for the last 2 years. That's the short version.
No, that's great. I love that. And we have to think a little different. I think there's, we'll get a little bit into tools for the 21st century and stuff like that, but we are living in a different time, and there's different, I don't know what you want to call it, but areas that we can step into in ministry that really we need to be stepping into. Last week, Joe Rutten was on the podcast, and he said, I can't wait for why aren't we creating the Legend of Zelda for Christianity, right? Just this idea that there is this whole world of video games, this whole world of streaming that is a new frontier for evangelization that we can step into. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like to work to evangelize in that context? How do you approach that?
So me personally, we kind of use the term pre-evangelization, like for what we're trying to do. I think back to now Bishop Robert Barron, back when he was just Father Barron, and he was doing YouTube. If you remember, he was doing like movie reviews on YouTube, and at the time, he was getting so much flack around the church and around the world for like, what is this priest doing? Talking about movies, like who, like what? And now like if you're a Catholic, ministry apostolate, you're trying to reach anyone. If you're not on YouTube, you're failing. Right, you're not going to do well. So like he was the first kind of mover, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, now you have to have a YouTube page. So Life Teen and Focus, and I mean, you name Ascension Press, all these companies, they all have YouTube pages. And so with live streaming, it's kind of this new frontier. It's been around for 15-ish years. And of course the church is always, the Catholic Church especially, is like the slowest to adopt. There's like Christian Protestant services and pastors and streamers who've been doing this for years. But basically live streaming, like people want to feel like part of community. We know this. We've wanted that since the dawn of time. We were created by God to be in community with each other. One way that people experience community, especially now in 2024, is online. Is that as good as in person? Probably not. Definitely not. But it can be a supplemental, and it can be an introduction to community for a lot of people. And a lot of people are spending time online. Like the stats are crazy. Young people, not just young people though, people our age, you and me, spend a lot of time online. And so the church needs to be there. And then this live streaming space, it's super important. So like we do pre-evangelization. So I'm hanging out. I'm just being myself. I'm doing barbecue streams, and I play Fortnite sometimes, and we talk sports, and I've got a podcast about media for kids. But we need people leading Bible studies live on Twitch, and people, doing catechism in a year, like Father Mike Schmitz is doing on Twitch, and doing these things live. We need way more people in the Catholic Church doing it, I think.
So yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I do appreciate that you made kind of that caveat that, is it as good as meeting in person? Probably not, but it's kind of a first threshold, isn't it? Sherry Woodell has her thresholds of conversion. It's that
Yeah.
pre-evangelization. It's that bridge of trust that you're creating, that they might never meet you in person, but they go, oh, Jonathan Blevins, I watch that guy online. He's super cool. He's really into his faith. Now this flyer comes across my desk, or I get this text from this, flock note that I signed up for at my church that comes across and says Bible study. We're talking about X, Y, Z. And I go, well, now I've got a little more trust in my heart. I know somebody that I respect. That makes the church approachable. That helps me to cross that first threshold and maybe enter in. Like it really does that pre-evangelization. I think that that's so valuable. Can you help me to understand? Because I don't stream. I'm not
Yeah.
on Twitch, and I'm in a rural area too, where I know that all the kids are streaming, but most of the people who are working the churches are not. And so,
Yeah.
what is Twitch like? Because you said leading Bible studies, and in my head, I think about streaming. I'm playing video games, and
Yeah.
thinking about, do you lead a Bible study while you're playing, or you can stream anything on Twitch?
Yeah, so it started off as a video game streaming platform. In the last, I don't know the year, but in the last 10 years, it was purchased by Amazon, right? So Google owns YouTube, and Amazon owns Twitch. And now you can stream anything. So cooking streams are really popular. Most people who are podcasting or doing sports talk radio are live streaming. Something really interesting is AM sports radio, like ESPN Chicago 1000 or 670 The Score. All these major radio stations around the country are all live streaming as well. And you can, it's so funny to watch the evolution over the last 2 years, where we're just going to put a camera on and we'll be live on Twitch, even though we'll never, ever address the chat, to now they're like, oh, if we're going to be live on Twitch, that's actually probably more active than the people trying to call in. So we need to be paying attention more to this live streaming stuff. But yeah, if you have a camera and you have the internet, or even just really good cell phone reception, you can go live doing whatever you want. Including, being wildly inappropriate and doing hot tub streams and all kinds of, things that you can imagine. But which is why I think we just need more good, wholesome, pure content out there.
Yeah, and what a low barrier to entry for someone who has. I think about, is it St. Paul who writes about, I try not to speak the word, or it's one of the prophets. I try not to speak. I try to hold your word in, but then it becomes like this burning coal, and like, woe to me if I don't speak it. Like if you've got that Holy Spirit fire, you feel like you feel called to share something, but you're not exactly sure. That's a low barrier to entry to start sharing what God is giving to you, what He's calling you to, and to be able to hopefully call people in. Like to me, that just seems like that really low barrier entry. People could get started today.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing, if I could, have anyone take one thing away from what I'm saying right here, the majority of people who I am meeting, and I've met a ton of people from my stream, a majority of the people that I've met, majority of the people that are in this stream that are on this platform, or even watching YouTube Live or Facebook Live, wherever they're watching live content, a majority of them are normal people.
Mhm.
A large majority. These are people that you run into in the grocery store. These are people you see at your church, people in your Bible study. These aren't like, oh, those weirdos who only sit in their parents' basement on the internet. No, like these are most of the people who watch me live every single day are at work and they're watching in the same way they would listen to a podcast. They're watching a live stream. And again,
Mhm.
I've met many of these people in real life. They've become very good friends. And so for sure, something that the church needs to embrace. Not everyone's called to it. But
Mhm.
the church absolutely has to be present in this live streaming platform in this space.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's important too. Just because it's a tool that's available doesn't mean everybody should be using it, or that
For
you are
sure.
called to use it, or that but to be maybe even start that conversation of who maybe should be. I think that's great. Well, I'm wondering, because you did say you pivoted out of working for the church. I'm wondering if I can get, and maybe whether you got some hot takes on this or whatever it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. One of the reasons we started our podcast is because I perceived a lot of frustration, and I don't think it's unique to working for the church, but there is a lot of frustration that people experience when they work for the church. And so I know you've been a traveling speaker, being in Chicago, you just seem to know everybody, and you were at the events where all the other DREs, catechists, leaders were at. Where have you seen people getting frustrated in their ministry work?
Wow. That's
Yeah.
I could talk a lot about it.
Mhm.
It's it's really tough. So I had 15 years in parish ministry, and I wouldn't trade it
Mhm.
for the world. In fact, God made me do it and wanted me to do it so that I would be ready to do what I'm doing now. And I learned a lot throughout those 15 years that I would not have been ready to do what I'm doing now if I hadn't learned all of that. But there's so much. It's so tough because I'll start with the first thing that comes to mind for me. I think what I've learned, because I'm in a for-profit business now. There's a very different type of person who works for profit and who works in a non-profit. It's very hard to self-motivate when you're going to get paid no matter what in a nonprofit organization, right? Like most nonprofits that I'm aware of, unless you have to fundraise for your salary, which is a horrible thing, and most churches should not be doing that unless they absolutely have to. It's hard to find people who are motivated to want to do better. You would think that's crazy, because you would think that for the salvation of souls that you should want to work more and try new things and reach more people. But often you just find people in ministry who are doing the same thing they've been doing for 50 years, for 30 years, for 10 years, and for 5 years, right? It has nothing to do with age, just with inability to change the approach of how we do ministry. And so I think in general, that is a problem that is in the church. To answer your question, what is a frustration that most people working in the church have? So many, but I think it often starts with there's a lot that is asked of our priests, just
Mhm.
a lot, right? I was talking to a really good friend of mine and a mentor recently. Every church seems to have that one volunteer who's been there forever. They're usually the first person to say hello to you when you arrive at this job, at this new parish job. And they're the first person to tell you who they are and how long they've been there and how they'll probably be there when you're gone. These are the people who often are not very kind, to the people walking in. You know what I'm talking about. You know the type in ministry, right? And,
We
and
call
it's
her Ethel on this
it,
podcast.
perfect, Ethel. Yeah, and bless Ethel's heart, because Ethel has been doing more for in service, especially in her mind for the church, or his mind, than most people in that parish. But the pastor's job is to minister to Ethel, and help Ethel to be kind and to realize it's not about her and it's about Jesus. And that's actually like a huge part of that pastor's job. And he also has to run all the councils, and he has to make the budget, and he has to make sure that everyone else and his staff is as happy as well, and raise money. There's so much. Um, and that is, it's just, I don't know what the answer is. I don't think it's because of a pre-shortage by any means, but I do think that that's a major issue, is that a pastor is supposed to be all things to all people. And that is so tough. You have to be like the perfect pastor to make that work. And that's just a lot to ask. Was my initial thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're trained to do something specific, right? They're trained to be a priest, to administer the sacraments. They're trained to understand the ins and outs of the philosophy behind the faith, the theology of the faith, so they can share the truth of God's love, of the way that God operates in people's lives. At no point, in my understanding, in their training, are they taught how to be the CEO of $1 million corporation.
Yeah.
In no way. And that does come with really unique frustrations, because your boss is someone who was kind of thrown into this job, in a lot of ways, that, the Peter principle, where
Yeah.
you just can, Peter didn't have the qualifications either, and he just got thrown into the job. And it was messy, just like it's messy today. And there probably isn't any one fix, but I think, we were talking right before we hit record. I think one solution is the role of the laity, right? The role of the way ministry should look in a church, and the way that individual families fill that role, right? So how does that look
Yeah.
in for you guys? Can you share that a little bit with us? Just what your ministry to your family looks like now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to share this, because this is something that I've come around on, even though I don't think I agree with it, but it's interesting. I was a career ministry person. I have a master's in theology, got into a crazy amount of debt that if I didn't win on Family Feud, I would still be in. Right. And so it hurt me when one of my very best friends, who's a priest, said to me that, I don't even think you should have a job. I don't think that there should be anyone in professional ministry. Well, then you wouldn't have a podcast, John. uh
Mhm.
and he goes, like, it should just be the lady, it should just be the volunteers. I was like, well, who would do youth ministry? Well, the lady. And I'm like, well, they don't have time, that's unrealistic. And he was a baby priest when he said this, and I was very defensive, and I don't agree with him still. However, now that I've got three older kids, older, they're 8, 9, 7, and 4. I see it now. I don't have time to volunteer for 4 different things, so it can't just be on volunteers to go and do things. But all that said, it is interesting that, I learned firsthand, it is really the role of the parents to catechize their kids. Like, it just really is. And so for us, you ask what it's like. We had our kids in Catholic school, a great school, St. James here on Arlington Heights. We loved it. They're, again, 9 and 7, and they were spending a lot of time, we thought, just sitting in a desk. And so we're like, oh man, we felt this pull to homeschool. My wife stays home with the kids anyway, and so a huge sacrifice for her still, but she decided to do it. And I teach religion, which is super fun. Uh, and my second grader, I'm prepping for, first reconciliation and first communion right now, and it's just incredible. Like, I did 15 years of full time ministry. Nothing compares to the time and the moments that I get to spend with my kids, teaching them the faith. And when you create time for it, there's the sacredness. They understand that it's different. They get excited about it. And it's incredible. And then what I've noticed in this last year of doing this, a lot of my friends who I met after working in the church, they're like, man, kind of know a lot of this stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, this is what I studied. But I was like, but you can do it too. Like, I'm teaching my kids the basics. And so it's just really interesting. So we try to live it out here in our domestic church the best that we can. We're not perfect, but it's been a great year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I there's something to that. I made the switch at the last parish I worked in, where essentially I said, if your kid's in the parish, you need to be, or if your kid's in the program, you need to be in the program. The whole idea being that so many of our parents that work in the parish aren't catechized beyond first communion, maybe
Yep.
confirmation if you want to count whatever they were given when they went through confirmation. And so that first or second grade level of knowledge in the faith. So when you bring them in and you're still just teaching the basics of the faith to the kids, it still hits home for the parents because that's where many of them are at in their education. So we did Ascension Press, the uh, God's Plan for Scripture,
Yep.
and for it just walks them through salvation history, the Bible, basically from front to back. And it was the first time most of those parents heard those stories and saw the whole picture of God's love for them, of salvation history and their role in it, and how it leads to the church we have today. And it just started making connections for people. It was really beautiful. And then when they do that, they go, I know more than I thought I did, but also this is more accessible than I thought it was. And both of those things create opportunities for dialogue. It creates opportunities to create that sacredness in their lives, in their home, and even to carve out time to go to it in their day. I love that. So I imagine, because I go to Catechesis of the Good Shepherd with my kids,
Okay. Yeah.
and so we're working to create sacredness. Do you have any like, well, either a funny story of like where something really didn't go go right, or maybe a moment where you're like, wow, my kid is receiving something here.
Yeah. So my oldest Caleb was at basketball practice, and I had my 7-year-old Zachary. At this time my 3-year-old daughter Kiara, and I had to have class with Zach that night. So I didn't have time to do our candle or to uh, really do anything. We had dinner. The table was super messy after dinner still, and I was like, "We have 30 minutes. I've got to do this with you, or Mom's gonna be upset. We got to get this chapter done, right?"
The real
Which is
motivating force.
Yes, which was like, of course, looking back, it's like, man, like, come on, John. Like, I do this. This was my job for 15 years, and I basically told my kid, let's get this over with, and then Kiara comes over, and I was like, hey, go do a puzzle, and she comes over, and she's like, I don't want to do a puzzle. Can I learn with you and Zachary? And I was like, no, this is Zachary's time. This is Zachary's time. And then Zachary was like, Daddy, would Jesus want her to, to like not do? And I was like, okay. You're like, what is happening? So I grabbed Kiara, I sit her down on my lap. I got Zachary sitting right next to me, and we do the entire thing. And Kiara didn't really, she was 3. She like maybe like closer to 3 than 3.5. She had no clue what we were talking about, but she loved every moment of it. And because she was there, Zachary got more into it, and he wanted to help her as well. And so it just kind of became this family thing instead of just like one-on-one, religious education that would have just been the same if we were sitting in a classroom. So that was just a beautiful moment. And then of course, as you know, man, kids they're the greatest, right? Like they just say the best things, they ask the best questions. And that whole night, Zachary was asking all kinds of good questions about, Nana and Papa who passed. Are they in heaven? What does that mean? I'm explaining to him that at Mass we're lifted up, and that all the angels and saints are singing with us, and that if they're in heaven, that they're with us singing there, and that's the closest we'll ever be to them, until we get to heaven. And it was an awesome, awesome night. But it started out horrible, right? It started out just like, let's just get this over with.
That's awesome. And just the power of that, right? Think about all the hopelessness that people are expressing in our culture and in our world right now, right? All this hopelessness, this seed that you are planting, that you're allowing them to experience, that there is so much beyond just this. There's so much beyond this, and you get to enter into that reality every day if you wanted to go to Mass, but every single weekend when we go. And this is why we prepare ourselves. This is why we learn. Like, what a gift to give to your kids, man. That is just awesome. And I'd love to see a parish full of that. I think that's what family formation is supposed to be, right? It's people pick it up as just another program that keeps them from having to do religious habit every single week.
Yeah.
But it's really meant to be this, where you have evangelized parents evangelizing their kids, cultivating an encounter with the living God.
Yeah, you're exactly right, John. And I think what you just said is what is missing from a lot of parishes right now around the country, is that we use the sacraments as the carrot on the stick, and then we use the kids as the carrot on the stick for the parents, rather and so we get the parents in the doors, right? And we're like, okay, we'll have a presentation about what the year is going to be and the requirements, and then we'll have, snacks and the what. But what's I think that we need to create an encounter, like you're saying, for the parents, the same way that we try to do with the kids, the same way we try to do with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and that Focus is trying to do on college campuses, is to create an encounter for parents. So we actually started, before I left my last parish, we started family catechesis, if you will. But we basically had a night once a month. It was required, but it wasn't. We weren't going to call home if you didn't go. And people, a lot of people showed up, and we called it encounter. We had adoration. There was music played throughout. We had confessions, a really good talk, basically an XLT, if people are familiar with that. But it was incredible. And when that happens, when you can get the parent's heart transformed and on fire, then I mean, the whole, like you said, the whole family is going to follow. And so I feel like if parishes focus more on that and less on, like, we just got to get the parents in the doors and we just have to get them to show up, it's to say, like, what can we do to help the parents have an encounter the same way you would with any other age group is huge.
And recognizing that those parents are going to be there in another 10 years, another 15 years. Those teens that you're trying so desperately and like throwing all this money into their programs, they are going to leave in 4 years, no matter
Yep.
what, right? They're graduating from high school. They're probably going somewhere else. Those
Yep.
parents are going to be there. They are the lifeblood of the parish. You have to spend time on them and getting their hearts. Otherwise, when those kids leave and they're not in the paragots, or they're not in the parish and their kids aren't needing to go through sacraments, then you lose the parents and the kids.
Yep.
So
100%.
you got to go after them. So obviously we've been kind of spouting out some of the holes, the leaks in the boat that we think we could plug, that we think could fix. But I'm wondering, is there anywhere that you've really seen ministry just being done well that you'd want to maybe brag on? It could be in your church or a ministry you follow. It could be your own work that you're doing with your pre-evangelization in yours. But where do you see ministry being done right now?
I've already kind of mentioned it twice, and it's funny because I never like the big dogs on campus, and I like the underdogs in all of life, but especially in ministry. Focus is killing it. The Fellowship of Catholic University Students, like what they're able to do, the model that they have, it's pretty undeniable right now. I thought that, and Life Teen is great. I've done a lot of work with Life Teen over the years. I still think they're great. I would always run into people at these events or in my life who are living out the faith, and like the one thread they seem to have was Life Teen. And now it's like everywhere I go, man, I'm meeting people who are Focus missionaries or who were in Bible studies at their university from Focus. That's awesome stuff. There's a parish in, I'm gonna forget the name, but there's a parish in Texas that is just, now they are financially blessed, and that is like, you can do, when you have a lot of money, you have a lot of responsibility, but you can do a lot of things. I went to this place, man. Every mass is packed. It's
Hmm.
security all over because in Texas, the churches are massive. You're talking about 2,000 plus people, in these churches. And they had at the end of mass, there was an announcement, and I was just visiting from out of town with my family. And this announcement, bro, I hate when churches do announcements at the end of mass. Like, just put it in a bulletin, put it on the screen, send a text. Like, you don't have to announce everything. And so I roll my eyes,
Yeah.
here are the announcements.
Yeah. They're just bending over backwards. It's like you're already not paying attention, so let's make one last desperate grab for your attention.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. But dude, there's the best announcements I've ever heard. And it was wildly
Okay.
overwhelming because they had so many things happening. But they were like, the Catholic, equivalent, whatever equivalent to Boy Scout thing is this weekend. The father-son trip with Father, what's his name, is this coming weekend. We have a March Madness party for all parents, and we're auctioning off barbecue, like brisket from the. I mean, dude, it was something for everyone. And I wished I was every age as they were talking. I was like, man, they're just doing so many things, and they're being so creative, and there's so many opportunities for community. I need to get the name of that church for you. But it was absolutely awesome. But like parishes that are thinking outside of the box, while of course being super reverent, right, and teaching the truths of the church, I think are just killing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, because there's a real person, right? They're doing that really authentic introduction to Jesus. They're that really authentic call to action. There's there's actually something they're inviting you to,
Yeah.
something real.
And something that I would probably say no to hanging out with friends or bring my friends to. Like, I
Mhm.
love the church I'm a part of right now. Absolutely love it. 9 times out of 10, I get an invite to an event, and I'm like, I could think of about 10 things I'd rather do. Bro, that day in that church in Texas, I was like, I want to go to all those things.
Yeah, somebody please invite me back.
Yeah, 100%. I'll bring
That's
all my
awesome.
friends.
All right, so we got one more big question for you, and that's just simply, if you had the attention of the whole world for 90 seconds, what would you say?
I purposely did not write anything down for this because I wanted to see what would come to my mind when you asked it. And I'm not telling you that's a stall. So is my 90 seconds already almost up?
No, no,
Uh,
we don't really time it, people.
no,
That's okay.
here's what I want people to know. I want people to know that people in general are good. That the world we're in, like, it can be very easy to look at the amount of time people are spending online and on their phones, and the just the horrible addictions that seem to be plaguing the world, to look at the politics, to look at the wars going on. There's so much negativity, and it can be very easy to just look around um and just think that we're bad, that people are really bad. Of course, we're inherently sinful and original sin and all of those things. But I think that generally people are good, and that the more often that we give people a benefit of the doubt, the better off we will be. There's especially this young generation, the Gen Z, and I think, what is it, Alpha coming up next? Like, they want good for the world. They may not know what that means, and that's on us as the elderly, older Catholics, to show them that the answer is Christ and his church. But their heart is there more than I think my generation's was. And it just, the world is good. And I think that Christ's message is being lived out in way more ways than we think. And it's up to us to find that and to share it, and to bring people into the church.
Amen, amen. Thanks for sharing that. That was about 86 seconds, so that's
Not,
about perfect.
I still got it.
All right. Well, Jonathan, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being on the podcast. Is there anywhere our listeners can go to connect with you, support the work that you do?
Sure. Appreciate that, man. Just Bearded Blevins anywhere. Beardedblevins.com. We'll show you all the different ways to watch what we're doing. Live streaming on twitch.tv/Bearded Blevins as well. And my friend, there's a podcast called Is This for Kids that we do to help parents navigate digital media. Isthisforkids.com as well. Is really fun.
Is this for kids? Okay. All right,
Yeah.
wonderful, man. Thanks for being on the podcast. And thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. If you want to transform your parish through your work, but you're not sure where to start, I want to encourage you, download our free parish health assessment at catholicministryprofessionals.com/free assessment. It's just 36 questions, takes about 5 minutes to fill out. And when you're done, you'll have a color-coded picture of your parish's health that you can use to fuel better conversations, prioritize better work, and become a better leader. You can always email us at catholicmenpros@gmail.com to share feedback, to request a free consultation. And finally, don't forget to text this episode to a priest or a friend in ministry if you think they could benefit from it. And with that, we'll see you guys in the vineyard.